Sometimes you'll have 3 voices, sometimes there'll only be 2 voices. Usually it's 3 to 4 though. Most contain only 3. Sometimes you get 4. So it doesn't have to necessarily go soprano, alto, tenor, bass. So the counter subject does not always appear 3 times as shown in the chart, and some fugues contain more than 1 counter subject, all right? So sometimes these counter subjects may change. This would be counter subject 1, counter subject 2, then it'll go back to counter subject 1, right? And sometimes, if you're really hardcore like Bach, while counter subject 1 is going, right, here, this will be counter subject 1 and this will be counter subject 2. So they'll still be going even further, all right? Sometimes you can have 2 different counter subjects going at the same time. So both links and bridges have been omitted from the chart in the interest of simplicity. So sometimes here you could see a link, right? Link. Actually, this would be a bridge. This would be a link. So to get back to the subject, we're going to see possibly a bridge could be here. All right? So that's all that is. So you might see a link between the subjects and counter subjects, or subject and answer. All right? Bridge between an answer and a subject. All right. So the second section of a fugue. So this is all exposition that we've been talking about. All right? So beyond that, once we establish this exposition and we establish the subject, counter subject, and answer, right, and even some of the free material, what we're going to do is enter a series of episodes and entries. All right? This is sometimes referred to as the development of the fugue. Right? So in here, you will not see any complete statements of the subject or answer in any voice during an episode, all right? So you won't see it, you'll see fragments of it, but it won't be completed. It won't be the full statement, all right? They frequently will contain sequences though, all right? And episodes are usually short. So they're usually only a few beats to a couple measures, all right? Let's see. There are 1 or more complete statements of a subject and or answer in an entry. If there are multiple statements, they're linked together, occurring more or less continuously, sometimes looking very much like complete expositions. All right? So in this case, this is a characteristic of an episode, all right? So in an episode, you won't have complete statements of subject and answer. Whereas in an entry, there are more than 1 or more complete statements of a subject or answer in an entry, all right? If there are multiple statements, they're linked together, occurring more or less continuously, sometimes looking very much like complete expositions. So it can look a lot like the exposition or the beginning part, but it's in the middle, so that's how we know it's not. It's an entry. As you can see from this description, the most important distinction between an episode and an entry is the presence of the subject or answer, right? So remember, if it's an episode, it's going to be fragmented and it will be sequenced. Whereas if it's an entry, it will be complete, right? And they'll be totally linked together if there's more than 1. So they'll come right after another. Question, answer, subject, answer, subject, answer. So the purpose of the episodes is to lead smoothly from one entry of the subject to another. Okay, so this basically connects entries to effect modulations to new keys, which is very typical in a second section. It might appear as follows. So in here, we'd see the end of the exposition, and we end up in key of F major, right? And we start with an episode, so fragmented subject, right? And we modulate in this episode, right? So we go from F major to D minor. And we do this by sequencing it, right? So we work our way towards D minor with sequences, right? And then we get a full subject answer, which is also known as an entry, okay? And then we'll get another episode where we modulate back to G minor, or we modulate even over to G minor rather than F major, all right? And we do the same thing with fragments of the subject answer, and we sequence it, right? And then we'll get another subject answer. So this would be called an entry, and it's not very clear in the book, right? But you'll get them sort of passing off between each other. So the introduction of keys beyond tonic and dominant, so 1 and 5, occurs in almost all secondary sections, all right? So it's going to go kind of crazy. Any of the closely related keys is likely to appear. So you can pull from any of those keys. Major, it could modulate to minor, and yeah. So if we look at measures 17 and 18 of fugue number 2 in C minor, in 310, it contains a typical episode. And here it is right now. We've got it printed a little bit later. But here you can see bum ba da dum da 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 da. So you can see each of these little fragments moving just like that, all right? And here's another sequence. Ya da 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 da. All right? Here's another one. It's a little fragment. Da 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 dum dum da 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 dum dum da da dum dum dum. Right? It's just moving up the scale, and it's basically slowly modulating us from the key of G minor in 1 all the way to C minor. All right? So that's basically how that works. So we're going to 4. Cool? All right, so subjects and answers are treated in a less structured manner after the exposition and can be seen in the following discussion of variants. So we do see something called stretto, and this means that the subjects and answers are going to overlap each other, right? So instead of having a full subject and then waiting until the answer comes in and plays in full before another subject comes in, what happens is you'll get subject and then the answer kind of comes in while the subject's still going. Counter subject happens here, right? And this is called stretto. So it'll be layered on top of each other, the subjects and answers. Or maybe that's a counter subject, but here's another subject. So it's going to be layered on top of each other. That's all stretto is. So yeah, the subject enters in one voice. Before it's completed, another subject enters in a different voice. Either the subject or the answer, all right? So you'll see it right here. This is a good example of this, right? So here we've got our fugue subject. Dun 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 dun, right? And here, before this one is finished, it enters bum 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 da 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 da. Okay? So that's all that is. So you'll see that. That's called stretto. So this period of overlap from here to here is the stretto. And this is very common. You'll see it all the time. Two more things that you have to know, all right? Augmentation. So augmentation refers to the doubling, tripling, or tripling of note values. So basically what happens is you have one fugue subject that's maybe all on eighth notes, right? And then in the other voice, they do the exact same thing. Notice in stretto, and they double it. So it goes into quarter notes, and it's spread out over the course of the fugue. So in this case, and actually this should refer to this guy right here, this quarter note E that's doubled. So here you've got quarter, quarter, right, tied to an eighth, and then eighth, 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 eighth. Here, all that's going to happen is it's going to double. So you've got a half note tied to a quarter, 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 quarter. All right, so it's basically, it's just taking, it's the Stretch Armstrong of fugue subjects. So you've got this guy right here, this is your fugue subject, and then you stretch it out and double it or triple it, okay? So you can see that happens quite often. And I'll put links to all of these so you can hear them and hear what they sound like. So the opposite of this is diminution. So you can imagine it's just the reverse of augmentation. So the note values are reduced. Usually they're halved, all right? So in this case, here's our subject. Whole note, half note, half note, half note, half note, quarter note. And then here you see the exact same thing, except it's turned into a half note and quarter notes instead of a whole note and half notes, all right? So they have the, and then here, strettoed right under it, same thing in diminution, so halved, and then here it happens again, right? Overlapped with this one, and halved as well, and then here it happens again, stretto. Okay, so that's how stretto works. Now, we're not going to worry about the rest of it. So when we get to next week, we'll start talking about retrograde and inversions and all that stuff. And we'll listen to the Crab Canyon, which is super cool. But